Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. And it is Wednesday, the 15th of December. So halfway through December and 10 days to Christmas. And we are still webinaring on Wednesdays here at Intertrust Scotland, as we have been since the early days of the restrictions due to COVID-19. So today we are joined at 11:15 with a special guest today, aren't we, Alistair?
Yeah, we've got Michael Byrne from Lived Experience of Trauma Support, who I first met when we were doing some planning for the Citizen Fest last year, when we were actually allowed to have a Citizen Fest in person. So
2019, yeah.
Wow. So that's very. Yeah.
And Michael did his workshop in the Scottish Youth Theatre, because that was the venue that I was coordinating in last year's Citizen Fest. So yeah, he got a good crowd in. So that's good. We'll catch up with him today and hear more. And just for anyone who's joining us for the first time, remember that you are able to make comments or ask any questions by using the comments box, and we will endeavour to answer them or to respond to them. And I'm sure Michael will as well. And we will go on until about just after 11:45 today. So we'll finish just after 11:45. So how's your week been, Alistair?
So my week's been good. It's been fine. It's just trying to keep track of everything that's happening. Obviously, one of the lesser good things, I guess, is the constantly shifting the tiers of COVID around the country. We're up to now a level 3. So
stepping back in line with everybody else now, Alistair, just about really. So.
Yeah, that's it. We've had it too good for too long. I had a conversation. To be honest, it's not making a huge difference to me, but there was somebody who I know who hasn't been able to access respite, who's been organising a de-stressing kind of break away, sort of like further north where it's lower level, and now of course the
travel
are changing. However, we've got a cunning plan, because basically he was heading off on Thursday. He's heading off tomorrow, and he was going to be coming back, I think, on Monday. But now, what we've arranged is just to stay in the tier 1 until the 23rd, because then everybody's allowed to travel on the 23rd. You can go wherever you want. So he just stays an extra couple of days, and then he can come back, and he doesn't break the law.
Oh, okay.
Which is lovely, because it would have been really sad if he couldn't get away at all. And it's just finding ways around these things, well, not just safely,
Yeah, it's getting the right balance there, isn't it? Because obviously, in terms of the impact, it was really important for him to be able to do, isn't it? So sounds like it anyway from what you're saying there. So
he hasn't had access to any of the respite all year, and so there's only been, I think, maybe 1 or 2 other trips away, so it's a massive difference. And I guess it's that what the SDS advice is, that people shouldn't be disadvantaged, and we're trying to make that happen in different ways. I've heard another example just before we came on live today, a bit of discussion about being an unpaid carer versus a paid carer for people when you can't get PAs due to the situation with COVID. Really, I've had a mum asking for travel expenses for her ex-husband in order to care for her daughter, but the response that she's got so far is that she can't do that, but what she can do is pay him as a member of staff. So that, to me, that didn't make any sense at all, because it's that whole thing about the equivalency model of if it's not going to cost more than that, it doesn't really matter whether it's the travel expenses or wages. it's whatever it takes, because he's on benefits, and it would screw them up and stuff. So it still feels a little bit frustrating that we keep, getting, well, people will ask for travel expenses in the future, so we can't ask for it. You know what I mean? We need to get much better at that. Oh, we've got an update from
quicker, smoother, and always bearing in mind that what's the most sensible way to help this person get some support, or the right support that they can get just for now. We did say we'd mention the SDS Collective, actually, Alistair, so maybe that's a good time to mention the SDS Collective, Self-Directed Support Collective. So if anybody hasn't heard of it, it meets, the SDS Collective currently meets every Wednesday for an hour from 12:30, and it's an open group of individuals and people from organizations, and quite a broad spectrum of people who come along to discuss how self-directed support can work better. So the initial aim was to ensure that the aspirations, what we want for self-directed support, are what people experience. So really to get into that idea that things should be better than they are, and we've got good legislation and so forth, but the practice of the experience of lots of people on the ground isn't working as well as we want. So the collective was formed really to try and address that to some extent. So it meets every Wednesday. If people are interested in finding out more, would like to come along to the collective, or just get in touch with us, and we'll share the links for that meeting, and people can just come along and test out and see if it's fun.
It's a really good way of collaborating together and problem solving about. Definitely. Cool.
Yeah, okay. Mark was saying hello with his little Christmas trees there.
He was, yes. Welcome again, Mark. Any questions, anything you want to say, feel free. That's because as we're getting closer to Christmas, he's got the Christmas trees up. That's the tricky thing, isn't it? We're still having all these debates about what Christmas is going to look like, because you are going to be allowed to travel at the moment, they're saying, but really there are some questions about safety.
Everybody's been discouraged from I think the message is stay as safe as you can be, isn't it? And only do any of those things if it's absolutely necessary for your own well-being, I think is the message. So I think that's what's out there, and we all just need to be careful again, of course.
Yes, and keep it light-hearted. Keep ourselves. Just keep ourselves well and have a bit of fun. And I guess that's some of the things that we do kind of need to do is seek out the fun, because there's so much misery.
Yeah, that's right. You were mentioning something about gig buddies tomorrow night, Alistair. So that's a bit of fun.
That's a bit of fun. So let's see if I can get the. Yeah, they've got a global Christmas gathering.
All right.
So that's what they're planning on tomorrow night from 8 o'clock, and so it's Gig Buddies project from UK and Sydney, Australia. So so we've got that on tomorrow night. So that should be pretty cool. If anybody wants to find out more, just go onto the Gig Buddies Facebook page, and they can find out a little bit more. So that's a bit. That there's been a lot of things around like that where folk have been trying to just keep connected, do some fun stuff, and make it work.
Yeah, I mean, Gig Buddies in Scotland also did a wee song about what does it say? Stay kind, be kind this Christmas, I think, or be in touch with people this Christmas. So if anybody wants to hear that, we've shared that on our Facebook today, and I think we're going to share it on our Twitter as well. And then we'll also play it on our music Stable It's got a music session in the early new year as well. So that's another thing. That's good fun. I enjoyed watching it.
Yes, they did. Yeah, they did. There was that as well. Yeah, they're singing the song and stuff. That was, yeah. They would, do they know it's Christmas? Or maybe
reworded though. Reworded.
Yes, indeed.
Yep. And yesterday, you were facilitating a discussion, weren't you, around the media?
Yeah, so that was an interesting one. So that was us having a think about how people with disabilities are being portrayed in the media, what opportunities there are for folk to take part in mainstream TV programs, how we were thinking a bit about the language and things that we're using sometimes for programs that talk about folk with disabilities, and just thinking a little bit about how we can all work together to make some of that stuff even better. I know that there's been a lot of effort made to move things forward, and that was partly what we were looking at. But it's like joining the dots even better, I guess. So one of the things we talked about, example, was the language. And we talked about, this is just an example of Channel 4's website, of their they're all four, they're streaming, and they've got a whole section of disability called We Don't Disability. And these were four of the programs that were actually on that. So we just had to think about, you know, the way that the terminology that we use. So often there's a lot of negative stuff still, you know, even if it's poking fun, and we just need to think about is that right for now?
Yeah, and there's a bit of a mismatch there, isn't there? Been a bit of a mismatch between the content and also the intent, actually, what people are trying to do, and the sort of sensationalist approach that gives you the titles like that, isn't there?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's that the intention is to have a bit of fun and to say, oh, look, people have said that sort of sensationalist of almost clickbait, like there is on the media of we'll put a sensationalist title and then and make something different. So we had folk from the BBC, and we had folk from STV, and the National Union of Journalists, and and a variety of different connections. I guess a lot of it was down to Michael McEwen and his media
journalist contacts.
So it was a really good start. So we're gonna follow up on it soon, and hopefully make some more connections and think about. Well, there's a few things we talked about that connection between people having opportunities to get involved, and thinking about how they connect to mainstream media. So making sure that the same people don't always just access exactly the same folk for set pieces. Making sure that folk don't also end up just having discussions round about one, like a one-dimensional discussion round about disability, and that people get a chance to talk about, other stuff that really matters to them. So that would be pretty cool. So we're looking forward to it. Other stuff that's going on.
Well, I was at Life Changes Trust shared learning event yesterday. So that was the shared learning event around the individual awards program for people with dementia and carers of people with dementia that they ran over a period of time fairly recently, and the evaluation report's just out. So the evaluation report of that award scheme's just out, and it was just a very interesting discussion quite a reflective discussion for me, really, because essentially the messages that were coming out from that individual's award scheme are all the same messages that we would be wanting to put out, that we would say are the learning from all sorts of different bits of work over the years, like the massive value of a preventative approach, and just the benefit of small bits of money that people can do what they want with. Basically, they can use in the way that makes most sense for them, and the whole choice, control, and flexibility, and all the real importance of maximum choice, people being able to look at what's going to make the most difference to me, and working it out like that. So it was a really interesting discussion. If people want a copy of either the slides from that presentation, or a copy of the evaluation report written by an organisation called The Lines Between, which is an Edinburgh-based organisation, or access to a couple of short animations that are written about people's stories from that individual award scheme, then Outside the Box have done a couple of animations, just animate a couple of people's stories. There's loads of materials there, and I'd be really keen to share that, because I think one of the things is just making sure that we do share learning from all those sorts of things as widely as we can do. So again, if anybody wants any of that information, we will put some links up. It was just yesterday, so once we get it, we'll put some links up on our website and through our Facebook. But if anybody would like to discuss it anymore or hear more about it, I'm really happy to get engaged with that.
So that's quite a variety of wider bits of work that we can then build on into the new year with some of our plans for the coming year. So cool.
There's plenty of others as well, isn't there? There's plenty of others.
Oh, there's plenty of others. I know. Well, that's I've got my Connecting Scotland training tomorrow about.
Oh right, Connecting Scotland. So that's the devices. It's the devices that we're going to get early in the new year, which are about a small number of devices that we've got to be able to give away to people who may be feeling digitally excluded. So again, we haven't really got a lot of time now to talk about that, but maybe we'll share a bit more about that next week, just in case anybody hasn't heard about that as well. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, and now if we invite our guest onto the screen. Hiya, Michael. How you doing?
I'm very well, Alistair. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Good to catch up with you.
Hi, Michael.
Hi there. How are you?
Yeah, fine. Thanks. Yeah.
So Michael, do you want to just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you started off Let's, and just about how things are for you at the moment?
Of course. First of all, can I just say it's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you very much for the very kind invitation to join you in this fantastic cause. A little bit about me. It's a bit of a checkered past. I can always say I have a very good relationship with poor mental health and trauma, as many people do in Scotland. And I like to say that my story isn't unique. There's just a lot of it. And I know you know some of the background to me, Alistair, but for those who don't, kind of potted version of it, my father was murdered when I was in my 20s. I lost twins through miscarriage in my 30s. I was in the Cluta disaster in my 40s, and I'm absolutely hoping for a fantastic 50s in light of all of those things. But ultimately, all joking aside, as a result of those three big cataclysmic things in my life, I ultimately had a mental health breakdown in 2017. And prior to that breakdown, I had been a director for a housing association in Glasgow. And my breakdown began in full swing. I just wasn't supported in any way. And ultimately that breakdown lasted for about a year. And I got diagnosed with complex PTSD during that year. And I know you've heard me say this, Alistair, I was the happiest man alive to be diagnosed with a mental illness. And I always compare it to the scene in Rocky where he's at the top of the steps and he's, cheering away. Because it meant that I could actually start dealing with everything in my life for the very first time. And I was very open to talking about it for the first time and not being fearful of the judgment and everything else that goes with the stigma. And they were all my feelings. They were all the things that kept me from being open about it. So through one thing and another, I had to leave my employment as a result of the breakdown. And then when I came out of it, I realised that perhaps my story, my experience, could inspire others and could help organisations to perhaps make change within their organisations and help support staff and customers, whatever we want to call it, as well as individuals as well. So I set up Let's in April 2018, and the premise of it all is just all about lived experience. So Let's, the acronym is Let's, and it's lived experience trauma support. And we are not academics in any way. I have academic colleagues that their background is academia, but they also have lived experience. But for me personally, I am not an academic, nor have I desire to be in the nicest way, because all of what we do is talk to people from the background of we've been through stuff, and if it helps you talk about it without it being threatening within a workplace environment or some kind of medical environment where you're going to be diagnosed or get medication, we're none of those things. You can just sit and have a blather with us about what we've been through, what I've been through, and relate it to your own experiences. And what I always kind of say, it's a little bit of a door opener, because you know yourself, when you offer a little bit of yourself, people generally say, I've been through something as well. And it's that informality that really starts the conversation. So I know that was a lot, and I'll take a breath now, but that's kind of my background and the fundamentals of why I started Let's, and that I thought it was fairly unique, and that just a lived experience could help others, because I firmly believe that if you don't know how to get through something, you generally want to talk to someone who's been through something similar, and that's the basic foundations of Let's in a potted version,
Perfect. Thanks for that.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you, Mike, obviously you will have had all sorts of plans for this year, and Let's is relatively new, isn't it? I mean, like you said, it started in 2018. And what's it been like? What was the last, 9 months or that we've all lived through in our own ways? What's that been like, and how has that changed things for you?
Well, I mean, prior to March, we had plans to introduce mental health first aid training from the perspective of lived experience. Now, you have to have an academic part of it because it's a certified qualification, but also mixed in the lived experience that I have, and show those delegates what really to look out for when someone's struggling with their mental health and coming in and hiding it within the workplace. So it's a really unique blend that we offer, and we were putting plans together to offer that in person to organisations all around Scotland and the UK. And then when COVID struck, we simply just changed it to a Zoom platform. It was a real smooth transition for us, and we just adapted it. And in some respects, it made it more accessible to a lot of businesses throughout the UK, because all you really have to do is just log on to your computer today rather than come up to Glasgow or us go down to London or whatever. So throughout the summer, we probably certified over 70 odd people to become mental health first aiders. I've still been doing the professional speaking, as Alistair knows, that's what we do. And I've done talks in Asia and in far away places. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd love to have went in person and done them. But as a result of all of this, my experiences have reached a far wider audience as such, and hopefully inspired people in a different way that perhaps they might not have been had this pandemic not happened. On a personal level, the same as everyone else, it's been difficult, housebound and so on, the same as everyone else. But I always say that because of my mental health breakdown, I have quite good coping strategies. So when the transition had to take place, I already had those coping mechanisms. But I think the difficulty for a lot of people who perhaps not struggle with their mental health was that for the first time they now were, and perhaps didn't have those coping mechanisms and didn't know how or who to reach out to. And I think that sometimes when you've got that experience, for me, it was a bit of music, reading my book, trying to go out for a run or doing some physical exercise. So professionally, it's went really well for Let's. We've managed to do a lot of work with a lot of organisations that perhaps we might not have been able to do at the early stage of doing it in person, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, so that there's quite a few bits I wouldn't mind picking up on from that, because there's the thing about the peer support being, there's not that power differential that folk worry about, because even though despite all the See Me and all the campaigns, there's still, especially in Scotland, we're not great at at talking, particularly blokes. We're not great at talking about how we're doing. Everything's fine, when you ask anybody how they're doing, and that's so there is still stigma out there, and people do still worry about being judged or maybe not being treated that fairly in a workplace if they do say, actually, I'm not coping that well. So I think that the power of peer support, we've been always champion in a variety of settings, because it creates that better balance of power, and it's not somebody coming in saying, I'm an expert because of my professional qualification. You're an expert by experience.
Absolutely, and I, with the greatest of respect, I know you would expect me to say that because it's my business, but I think that there are a lot of organisations in the country who have employee assistance schemes that have been in place for 10 and 15 years, and generally when I speak to clients, that sentence is followed up by, and it's not that well used. So it's not really fit for purpose, because it's been cut and pasted for the past 15 years that we'll offer 6 weeks counselling and we'll do this and we'll do that, but you need to ask your boss for it first of all. Well, if you're struggling with your mental health, as I was, I believe that it was career suicide to go and speak to my boss and say I'm struggling. And it was a very male-dominated senior management team that I was in. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to any men or women, just what it was. So counselling's not used a lot, perhaps because it's, and I always say, I think it's, if it's the first rung in the ladder, it can perhaps be a rung too high. What I think we offer, and again, not a sales pitch in any way, is that peer support of ground level to build people's confidence up to then say, great, there are other people like me who've been through some things and got through it, and can you give me some tips? And what things work for you? And maybe I can explore them, and the employee assistance program or scheme then becomes a different thing altogether, that it's more staff focused as opposed to organisationally focused of, here's what we give you. And I speak to clients all the time and say, when was the last time you actually asked your staff, if you were struggling with your mental health, how would you want us to know about it, and what would you like us to do to support you? It's that I've never thought of that before, but we know that because we have experience of peer support, and it's a bit.
Yeah, I'm just thinking. I've been a great fan of kind of sort of like anonymous 360-degree feedback within organisations about what's making sense, what's not making sense, and things like that, to allow people the safe space to say, look, do you see this as a tick box exercise, or would you genuinely use it? If you wouldn't use it, what's getting in the way? What would make more sense for you? I think because, like you say, people often don't, even if it's well intentioned, even if the organisation thinks, oh, well, we've got that there, so it's fine. If they haven't gone that extra mile to actually say, well, but do you feel safe using it? When people don't feel safe, they make choices that are awful ones because they don't, and that's often my experience with working with people over the years has been that when people close some doors off, that's when things go badly wrong, because they say, oh, well, I just can't go there. I can't go there for this.
Absolutely. For me, I self-sabotaged when I knew that I needed help, but I couldn't open up to anyone in my personal life, and I definitely couldn't open up to my employer. So I just sabotaged everything in my life in the hope that someone would say, your personality's changed, all your behaviour's changed. Can we offer you some support? Mm-hmm. But suppose it comes down to, do employers actually want to do that, and with the best of intentions? Do they see their staff members as just performers, or do they actually care about the well-being of their staff? And I mean that in the nicest way, because there'll be both, out there. One of the things that we always talk about when we offer mental health first aid is actually, what do you do after that? So if you have staff who became mental health first aiders, and they're maybe dealing with 10 cases or 10 people who've came to them, who supports them? Because it's all great offering peer support, but how do you get support? And what we offer is fairly unique, is that aftercare support. And as part of that model, what we talk to organisations is how well accessed are the mental health first aiders? Is it working? Is it not working? How are you promoting it as an organisation? How are you supporting those staff? What are the barriers to your staff actually accessing it? And one of the things we also speak about is that if an organisation expects to measure it through a key performance indicator, then they're going about it the absolute wrong way, because not many people voluntarily go to their mental health first aid and say, I've got a problem. What they'll generally say is, if you've got a wee second, can I have it's a wee informal chat because you need to test the water. And we always say to organisations, don't have a KPI for this. Don't measure it. It's all about saying it's there if you need it. And generally, more than not, it's all informal conversations because that's what builds a confidence, as you'll know, Arthur, to actually have that conversation when the time comes.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking about that, though. I guess because we're working in health and social care, and there's a lot of very high pressure discussions round about people's rights, people's living situations, interpretations of legislation. We see a lot of, and there's a lot of industries where there's a lot of burnout, but that health and social care, that there's quite often a lack of a mismatch we sometimes see between what people are told to do and then what's expected of them and what they feel is right. And that can create situations where, you get people burning out, going off, taking early retirement, going off long-term sick. Yeah. So even if you're not, like you say, without the KPI things, if somebody says to me, because I did mental health first training a few years ago and stuff like that, I was a trainer, and one of the things was, what are your exit interviews? Are you seeing where people are leaving? Are people thinking about, are you getting the same message about what's expected of you and if you'll get support or if you'll be left hanging in the breeze if someone goes wrong? And if you're putting all those pressures on folk, then you're certainly not helping people's mental health. So there are some no-brainers if people are prepared to sit back and look.
Absolutely. I mean, I was 17 years in a senior management director role, and it was very unsupported. Now it's beneficial to me now because it allows me to see the gaps in service provision for organisations because I've been there, but also someone who's suffered with mental health as an employee and as a human being where the gaps were. But I think that. Going back to the earlier question, I hope that one of the main benefits of this pandemic, if there are any, hopefully there will be, is that we can actually begin to talk very openly now about mental health, either privately, within our own private lives or professionally. And we ask about it as often as we ask about someone's physical health. And I hope that those conversations can begin to take place. I think that there will always be organisations who aren't interested in their staff's mental health, and that's, it's going to be very difficult to change that culture. But the more people who begin to have conversations about it within the workplace, whether that be first aiders or whatever, I go in and do, professional talks with a lot of organisations with a view to well-being stuff, and that is a conversation starter. But equally, there are some who just do tick box as well, and that is disappointing because it's in our heart, all of us, to do it with the best of intentions. But I've now got to the point probably about 6 or 7 months ago that if the ethos of the organisations that I'm going to do some work for don't match my own ethos, I'm not interested in working with them. So that's my decision as the chief executive of my organisation, that if they don't marry up with the ethos of what I expect for mental health within the workplace, and I don't mean that in any kind of big boots way. It's not about zeros in the business bank account for me. It's about actually helping people to say or put their hand up and say, I'm struggling, but if that guy can get over it and get through it, then maybe I can as well, and reach out. And that's more important to me than anything else.
Michael, you've been talking about your organisation in terms of we. So, and you mentioned there that you're the chief executive. So, are there other people involved in Let's as well?
Yeah, there are. We use the services of some other partners. So, for instance, I've got a partner who delivers the mental health first aid training with me. We also do other work. Recently, we're doing some work on vicarious trauma. Where we have a therapist, qualified therapist, who helps us to deliver the training on that as well. So we pull the resources in whenever we need them, depending on what the client's looking for as well. But predominantly, I suppose the kind of eye catcher is me delivering a talk for an organisation. That generally ends up being, can you come back and do some one-to-one sessions with us, or can you facilitate workshops? Can we do other things? Because, as we said earlier, I think people are beginning now to realise the benefits of real-life stories that people can actually it can resonate with them and inspire. So yeah, it really just depends on the needs of the client. So again, and if we do one-to-one work and we come up with someone who's perhaps not mirrored what some of the experiences I have, we'll put them in contact with someone who can. So for instance, I'm not great at alcoholism. I've self-sabotaged with alcohol in the past, but it's not my experience of alcoholism. So we would partner the person with someone who has that background rather than, take them down a false path. So there are other people that we call upon the services of who are affiliated with Let's.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's really useful. I was just going to say, we are doing some work with Life Changes Trust with care experienced young people, and that's something that we've been very interested in the crossover with, because a lot of care experienced young people have had very traumatic experiences in terms of going into care, the experiences in care, often then going out very poorly prepared into, living on their own, being taken advantage of, not really having anybody to back them up. It's a huge issue. I mean, the figures for care experienced young people in terms of entering, having mental health issues, entering the criminal system, issues with employability, the people are being failed on a massive scale, and so it's always interesting to try and find ways that we can help to equalize the balance a bit there.
Absolutely. I think, as I said, the more of us that are open about our own experiences, good and bad, without apportioning any blame, to say, look, we can overcome. Let's just try something different. And I think that what we try really hard to do is not be prescriptive. I think without, criticising any organisations or NHS or anything like that, I tend to think that we live in a society now that's very prescriptive. So I have a friend who I was in the Clutter disaster with, and he knows and I know that he's PTSD. You can't go through something like that and not have it. But hell will freeze over before he'll go to the doctors and get diagnosed with PTSD, because then what will happen is you've got PTSD, you then have to get this treatment without actually having a conversation of, well, what do you think would help you? What, and taking it from that perspective. So we try really hard not to be prescriptive and look at it from the point of view of, okay, what sort of things do you think would benefit you, and allowing them access to the things that would benefit them. And I know for me, it's physical health, music, reading, those sort of things. And I know what my triggers are. And there's a whole, a lot of learning around all of that, rather than just say, right, you'll go for 6 weeks of this, or you'll go for that, you'll go for that. So I suppose that makes it more, that person-centered word or whatever. But actually, how many times do we actually ask somebody, what would you like to do that you think would help you? And that's the start point, rather than you need to go for CBT, or you need to go for this, you need to go for that.
And that's the professional fixer model, and that's a lot of what we are recommending. There's to move away from is we need to understand what's important to the person, rather than walk in through the door and say, "Hi, I'm here. You need this."
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't, when I was going through all my trauma, and there was stuff I missed out there in that potted version. But when my father was murdered in my 20s, the last place I was ever going to go to was counselling. And in my head, I was going to sit in a dark room or a dimly lit room with 2 chairs, a big clock, and a box of hankies. I was 25 years old and a Glasgow boy. That was the last place I was going to be. I was going to keep it all in, deal with it. And you turn to booze, you turn to alcohol, you turn to all of these things that help you cope over a weekend. And I would do all of them because there was no alternative to this academia of going and seeing a counsellor or whatever. I think perhaps Victim Support Scotland may well have just started around about that time, but there were no other organisations, and there was certainly nobody like us who talks about our lived experience that could put that kind of almost metaphoric arm around you and say, look, it'll be all right. But times are changing now, and I think, as I've said before, that if we can start looking at different models and saying, okay, look, what do you think? What are the problems? What's causing your triggers? Right? How can we deal with those? And actually, what's going to make you feel intrinsically happier? Because fundamentally, that's where we all want to be. I always say that, despite everything else I've been through, the breakdown was the best and worst thing that ever happened to me. Taking aside my son being born, the worst thing because it was 13 months of torture, but the best thing because it allowed me to get rid of all of my inhibitions and those judgment fears and actually just be the person that I was going to be. I didn't know who or what I was going to be, but it allowed me to be that person. And now I no longer have anyone's fear of judgment. I don't have all of those baggage. And it allows me to stand and talk in front of however many people and be myself. And I don't fear anyone's judgment. And it's very liberating. And I suppose that's what we want to get people to that place, to say, you know, don't be scared of what people think about you. It's important what you think about yourself. And as I said, I'm intrinsically happier than I've ever been. Not because I've got a Mary Poppins life. I've got the same worries and frustrations that everyone else has. But I'm happier with me than I've ever been, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. Great observations.
Yeah. How do you, I suppose what I'm thinking, Michael, is I'm thinking about, like, for example, yesterday that we were hearing all about the statistics in Scotland about having the worst drug death rate of any country in the European Union, didn't we? And there's just so much when I hear that, and when I hear you talking as well, there's like, you just feel there's so much to do. How do you keep that within a way that you think, right, okay, this is what I'm going to do, that's what I'm going to focus on, and we think we can make a difference there? How?
I mean, I agree with you. Yesterday was a damning indictment of Scotland, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean it was on the national news, it was on Sky, it was all of those things. And, you know, I think there's a reality there that those 1,200 deaths are 1,200 individuals, but it's 1,200 families, it's 1,200 extended families, and that ripple effect just continues on. I think that for me, it's all about what I try and do, and I'm a trustee on a couple of boards to help other people as well. And I think it's just about saying, look, you can't change those things. Those traumatic things have happened to those 1,200 people, those 1,200 families. And we can try and support them as best we can by offering something different, but being there. And I think there's a lot of power in saying our door's open. You can contact me anytime. I'll get back to you, or I'll answer the call, whatever it is. But there's loads of people like me. So I know other organisations. I've got other people who I became friends with who do something slightly different from me, who maybe use sport to help people open up about mental health or overcome their trauma. So the way I look at it is that if I'm not the right person and my organisation is not the right person, that doesn't mean that it's over. It means, hang on a minute, I'll get somebody for you, or I'll put you in contact with somebody because this person absolutely is the right person, or they'll put you further on your journey. I think that, as I said a couple of minutes ago, if everything we were doing up till now was working, we wouldn't have 1,200 deaths. And I don't mean that as a criticism of any organisation, but let's just accept that what we're doing isn't working. And let's just forget about, we just keep doing the same thing over and over. It's Einstein that said, if you keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, it's a sign of madness. I've been there, so I know what it's like. But let's just admit that it's not working. And let's just say, let's just admit that it's not working. Oh, sorry, I seem to have lost my connection.
Oh no, you're still there.
Okay. So what I would say is let's just accept that it's not working, and let's just say what would work, and speak to those people. Speak to people who are currently, using drugs and alcohol and other supporting measures in their private life to get them through, and ask them, what can we do to help you? Let's start from the bottom up as opposed to this prescriptive model. But as I said, I'm fully aware, as you just said, I don't have all the answers. I like to think that we just offer something different, and through that we can help people. But also with the understanding that it won't suit everyone. And hopefully there are loads of other organisations that can help other people as well. And I don't see it in any way as competition. I see it as collaboration. The more of us who can do it, the better.
Yeah, and that is quite a freeing thing, though, that going into a room, because I remember years ago being in a situation where the expectations, you went into a room with a strategic plan, with the answers, to all the questions, and being a good manager was being able to batter out the answers. If you see page 3 of the strategic plan, blah blah blah, rather than stopping and thinking and actually listening and saying, well, what does this mean to you? Does this make sense? Does it connect to what you're doing? If not, how do we how do we unlearn? Because quite often it's about organisations getting out of the way, and this fixation with a strong leader is somebody who has the answers is nonsense, and that often seen weakness is
you know yourself, Arthur. I've been a director for a housing association. You go and you get a big staff conference and you pour out all the things that you're going to do. Here's your new policies. Here's all of that stuff. Staff, the eyes of the staff glaze over. They're not that interested. And I mean that with the greatest of respect. I've been there. I've been on both sides. But actually, see if you said to them, look, let's just forget all of this. Let's just get to know each other for a start, and let's just see what are your expectations of this organisation. What are our customers' expectations? How can we meet all of those expectations and make this a fantastic place for you to work and for us to deliver everything? And if you take that same model with actually, helping people and supporting people, you get people together and say, how can we help? We are a blank, we're a blank canvas. How can we help you? This is the area we want to focus in, whether it be, drug use, alcohol use, trauma, whatever it may be. How can we help you? And as I said, and if you can't do it, it's fine. It's about finding the correct model for people rather than saying, here's what we do. I often liken it, this is a wee bit strange, to American restaurants. Okay, see if you ever go to Florida or New York or whatever, you can go into a restaurant and say, can I have my steak medium rare? Can I have it with this? Can I have it with that? Can I have my bread to be all of these things? And no one bats an eye because you're the customer. Yes. You go in and you tell, here's what I would like or here's what I'd need. You go into a restaurant in Scotland or Glasgow, I'll narrow it down to Glasgow because I know what Glasgow's like. You go in and you say, I'd like all of that. And you say, that's not what we've got. That's not what we do. We give you it like this. And you can either have it or you can leave. And I think, it's so different. And we're sometimes trapped in this mindset of, oh, no, that's what we deliver, so we can't change. Forget that. If it worked, we wouldn't have statistics like we've got. And I don't mean that to be a part of political rant in any way. I'm not saying that, but does that make sense, I suppose?
No, that does.
It does. I mean, I suppose for me, the interesting stuff is taking that across to self-directed support, which is the area that we are working in, and we know that it's not working as well. We know from talking to everybody every day that it's not working as well as it should be. Yeah. So we need to go back to those essential questions. What would it take? What would it take for this to work really well? And really listening to the voices of people whose experience is telling us this isn't working in the way that it should be. So
I mean, one of the fundamental things I want an employer to gauge where they are, and I know I'm talking about employment and it's different from peer support, but it kind of shows the measure, is that I'll ask them, do you have a sickness and absence policy? Yeah, we do. And you need to phone in on the first day and the third day, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll ask them, do you have a mental health sickness and absence policy? Because the one you've got would have been for physical health, and you probably wrote it 5 years ago, 10 years ago for when Johnny gets a stomach bug and all of that sort of stuff. Do you have a separate one for mental health? No. Yeah. Why wouldn't you have a separate one? Because, if you're phoning in struggling with your mental health, generally sickness and absence policies, you need to phone your line manager. You're generally absolutely not phoning your line manager to say, listen, I'm really struggling with my mental health because it's career suicide. But it starts the conversation to get them to think a wee bit differently of, my goodness, we actually need to treat this a wee bit different from physical health. And if sickness and absence policy is the policy we don't have, what else do we not have? All right, okay. And it kind of, it's an eye-opener then to think, my goodness, we perhaps need to do a lot more than we think. And then it goes along to what you just said there of, let's ask the staff, just a bit like, the service users or whomever it may be, how can we help you? Rather than it being, we're the organisation, we'll tell you what we've got and you can fit in with that or not. Actually, let's take it the other way and say, look, we really want to help and we want to make it the best we can. How can we do that for you as a service user? And I mean that in the nicest way. It's not a phrase I particularly like, but whatever it is, we're trying to deliver,
Yeah. We're actually almost out of time, Michael, already.
Wow.
Yeah.
Apologies if I've overspoken.
No, it's all really good stuff.
Yeah. So we what we usually do at the end of these sessions is we just go around each of us and say any last comments. So we'll just do that, and then we'll come to you last of all, Michael, just for your for your final comments. So, Alistair, anything for you, just in terms of looking forward to the next week? Final comments from today.
Over the next week, well, just looking forward to it. So next week's webinar Wednesday will be a massive get together with lots of previous presenters. So that's going to be good fun. And my other last thought is just as a random backwards thought, just based on what Michael just said about how you respond to requests for anything different in Scotland. I went to a gig at the Barrowlands many years ago, and went to the chip shop opposite the Barrowlands, and my friend goes in and says, "Could I get a chicken pie?" And the guy says, "A chicken pie, a chicken pie. Oh, he's wanting a chicken pie. We've got steak or mince." That was. You've got a choice. You can take it or leave it.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, we will be leaving you shortly.
Yes.
So next, I'm just going to say next week we're going to have 10 people on here, aren't we, Alistair?
Yeah,
so
we are.
We're a bit crowded on the screen next week, but anyway, that's what we're doing. And for other people thinking about it, we're then going to have a break from the webinar Wednesdays for 2 weeks after that. So this is next week's Christmas special, and then a break for 2 weeks after that. So, if anybody wants to get in touch with us about anything that they've heard today, please do that. You can get in touch at info@in-controlscotland.org.uk or just through our Facebook. Michael, I'm just going to leave the last words to you, but also just let people know about how they would get in touch with you if they felt like they wanted to as well.
Thanks very much. Just on a final note, thanks very much for the invitation to be here today, Alistair. I really appreciate it. You can get in contact with me at our website, www.livedexperiencetraumasupport.com, or LinkedIn, Facebook, Michael Byrne, whichever way is beneficial to anyone who wants to contact me. The final note I would say is, don't wait for someone else to be the change. Be the change you want to see in the world, whether that's in mental health or peer support. I think the time has come for us not to wait for someone else to do it. Be the change, and let's just do it ourselves.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody, and have a great Christmas when it comes.
You too. Thank you very much. Have a great time.
Bye.